Hi again, and welcome back. In the previous episode, we created a triggerable obstacle and learned a new statement called switch. In this episode, we will create a spring that will bounce the player into the sky when touched. Let's deal with the graphics first. Select the spring sprite and change the sprite mode to multiple. Then open the sprite editor and slice the sprite with the cell size of 128 by 128. When you're done, click Apply and close the editor. Next, drag the spring _0 sprite into the scene. Give it a name Spring and change its order in layer to 3. Then give it a Box Collider 2D component and switch on the Is-Trigger option. After that, adjust the collider so that it covers the wooden part of the spring. Next, it's time for the animations. While spring is selected, click Create on the animation window and name the clip to Spring Idle. Then drag the first frame on the timeline. This animation is now done. Then it's time for the next one. Create a new clip and name it as Spring Active. Drag the spring _1 on the timeline. Then spring _2 to 0.04 seconds. Spring _3 to 0.08 seconds. Spring _4 to 0.16 seconds. Another spring _3 to 0.24 seconds. Another spring _4 to 0.34 seconds. Still one spring _3 to 0.44 seconds. And one spring _4 to 0.52 seconds. Then spring _5 to 0.58 seconds. Spring _6 to 1.04 seconds. Spring _7 to 1.1 seconds. And finally spring _8 to 1.16 seconds. We can test the animation by pressing the play button. Looks good. Next, select the Spring Active clip from the Animations folder and switch off the Loop Time option. Now, it's time for transitions. So, open the Animator window. First, create a parameter which is of type trigger and name it as Player Touch. Then, make two transitions from idle to active and from active to idle. Select the transition from idle to active. Set Player Touch as the condition and remove the exit time. After that, change the transition duration to 0.05. Then select the other transition. We don't need a condition for this. The exit time will work fine. Just change the exit time value to 1.16, which is the same as the animation's length, and the transition duration to 0.03. Next, it's time for coding. Create a new script with the name Spring and attach it to the game object. Open the script for editing. First, we need to create few variables. First one will be for the physics force we use to bounce the player. Other one for the animator component, and the last one for the player script. Write public float spring force equals to 15F. Then under it, private animator anim, and lastly private player player. Then in start function, write anim equals to get component, animator and player equals to find object of type player. Next, we need to check when the player enters inside of the trigger area. So, write void on trigger enter 2D, collider 2D, other. And then, if other.gameObject.tag, two equality signs, player. If we want the player to bounce, we need to add force to its rigid body. Write player.rb.velocity equals to new vector 2, 0f spring force. Note that there is a red wavy line under RB variable. It indicates that there is an arrow. The arrow is caused by the fact that in the player script, RB is set to private, so we can't access it from other scripts. Switch to the player script. Instead of private, write hide in inspector in square brackets and public after them. Now we can access this variable from other scripts, but it is not shown in the inspector even though it's public. Let's save and get back to the Spring script. Great! The red line has disappeared, so it should work now. Before going to Unity, we need to influence the animations of the player and the spring. We want the player to switch on the jumping animation, so write player.anim.setBool jumping true. The red line appears under anim because it is also private. Before changing it to public, let's change the animation on the spring. Write anim.setTrigger player touch. Okay, now we can switch back to player script. We need to do the same thing as before. Replace private with hide in inspector and public. When you're done, save the script and return to Unity. Move the spring to some nice place and test it. Awesome! It works like a glove. You can tweak the strength of the spring by changing the value of the spring force variable as you like. Last thing to do is to drag the spring into the prefabs folder. Great! We are done. Now we have a spring that bounces the player around. In the next episode, we will make the game even more challenging by creating turrets that shoot the player. Remember to save the scene. See you in the next episode.